Vice Chair and Secretary Ian Bruce in a moment to introduce the panel and lead proceedings. Just so that today can run fairly smoothly, we will be recording this for later review. So if this evening you decide you want to sit and watch it back with a glass of something red, then you have the opportunity to do that. If we could ask, just for the benefit of everybody, if you can remain on mute unless you're asking a question, obviously remembering to take yourself off mute should you wish to ask that question. And if you are struggling with internet or connection issues at any time, then switching your camera off might just help to ease the any blockage on the internet connection. If you've used Teams before, I'm sure you'll be aware of the chat function. So if there are any questions that you wish to ask and you're shy, or you just want to pop a quick comment in as somebody is talking, then please feel free to ask that, and we'll be keeping an eye on the chat function just to make sure that we give you the chance to get as much as humanly possible out of today's session. So I'm hoping that Ian is there, and I can hand over to Ian to lead us through today's Soft Focus Live. Ian, are you there? Ian, you're on mute. Hello, Ian, can you hear me? Okay, well, I'll just quickly run through the panel. As you can see on screen, we've got a superb and quite diverse panel today. We've got Paul Hobbs and Mike McGale, both from Horsham District Council, to give us the environmental health view, both from food and health and safety. We have Will Smith, the Client Director for NSF International, Sylvia Anderson from Sylvia Anderson Consultancy, Tracy Colbert, Director of the On-Park Risk and Compliance for Park Dean Resorts, and somebody I know very well, Deb Smith from VCAN, the Global R&D Manager. So I've just seen Ian come off mute. So Ian, would you like to kick things off?
Yeah, sorry, I'm going to have some technical challenges. So I'm going to I'm a bit mobile at the moment. So while I get myself organised, maybe we could start. What I'm proposing is that we start from Paul and Mike's perspective, from an enforcement perspective. Maybe Paul, you could just sort of give an overview of the areas that you're focusing on at the moment, and what are the key areas you're advising on, or what are your concerns currently? And I'll just get myself attached while you do that.
Yeah, no problem. I mean, on the build-up to the 4th of July, the council did an awful lot of work about price. What really surprised us was not so much the cash flow, but a number of folks were actually really nervous about.
Sorry, Paul, could I just interrupt you for 1 second? You're coming over very broken up, so it might be an idea if you want to turn your camera off. You might find the audio comes through. Yeah, you're coming through a bit like I'm trying to remember the old comedian that used to talk in staccato, but I can't remember his name, which shows my age.
Okay, yeah, it must do, because I don't recall it. It must be before my time.
That's certainly much better, thank you.
Yeah, as I say, there were a number of premises that were really nervous about opening Saturday. They were predicting Armageddon, really, and the concerns that they had were really around about social distancing, and in particular customer social distancing. They had the guidance given to them. They put their procedures in place, and what they were really worried about was how the customers were going to react, and how they would react if customers were challenged about breaching social distancing. So there was a lot of concern around that, and from a local authority point of view, with our licensing team, it was going out and trying to give a bit of reassurance, really, that you know, the general public do have a responsibility, and at the end of the day, you know, if they don't do as they're supposed to do, you know, we're going to end up with further lockdowns, and you know, they'll only have themselves to blame.
Think you may still be having connection problems. So Paul, yeah, I can see your point there. Mike, would you like to join in on that one?
Mike, you there? I can hear you, Peter. so it's not you or me. So Mike, are you on the line?
Mike is still muted, I think, by the looks of it.
Mike is still on mute. So may I suggest the panel take themselves off mute?
Okay, yeah, sorry. I can only reiterate what Paul was saying, but something that we did find was, although a lot of generic control measures had been adopted, sometimes there were instances where they hadn't really quite considered their environment and how that their own risk assessment should have reflected that. That said, on the visits, the proactive visits that we did make, the advisory visits that we were asked to do, we found a high level of compliance and everyone really trying. I can only touch on what Paul has said and said our real concern is the hard work hasn't just been done, it's only just begun, because now we've got to involve the public, and it's the public that are going to throw the cat amongst the pigeons and scramble the whole thing. So, you know, as much as these control measures are in place and the risk assessment has been done and they're very good, they still require a level of supervision, because ultimately it's the owner, the duty holder, that has overall responsibility of that assessment.
Thank you, Mike. Peter, would you mind just doing me a favour and maybe keep an eye on the chat function? As I said, I've had to dial in and got this on my screen. I can't see the chat function.
Absolutely, no problem. Yeah, no problem with that at all, Ian.
Thank you, Peter. So Paul, you know, anything else you would like to add? I think we lost you. Wonder whether you're back.
Yeah, well, as I said, we did a lot of guidance and advice beforehand, and one of the things that was a bit of a concern to us was that on the approach to the 4th of July, there was lots of talk about the social distancing being reduced from 2 meters to 1 meter, and what we were trying to convince businesses is that, you know, that isn't a blanket requirement. The 2 meters still has to be maintained. It's only, you know, 1 meter if it isn't feasible to maintain 2 meters, and there has to be mitigation circumstances in place. And I think a lot of businesses, because the guidance wasn't very clear, and you know, a lot of the information that came out prior to the guidance wasn't clear, a lot of businesses just naturally assumed that the 2 meter distancing had been reduced. 1 meter, and they can just carry on with the 1 meter in place, and that took a lot of work on our behalf to persuade businesses otherwise.
So I know that this is something that I talked with some of the other panelists with previous to the call. So it'd be good if we could come back to that, to the 1 meter. As we move on with some of the panelists, I think if we could do that, maybe. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Mike. Maybe as we get questions coming through, it'd be good to be able to ask you to respond to those. But let's see what comes through on chat. Maybe we could go on to, I guess, those practitioners or consultants into the hospitality sector. Maybe we could move to Sylvia. Sylvia, Mike and Paul have talked around risk assessment, control measures in place. and management of the public. Do you mind just giving an overview of what you have seen or what you've been advising to businesses as they open up around those areas, or any wider insights that you can provide? Sylvia, you there? Can't see whether Sylvia's on or not.
If you can hear us, Sylvia, I think you're still on mute.
Yeah, I can't see whether Sylvia's on the screen or not from my computer.
Maybe Tracy may have or Will may have a view.
Well,
hello, hi. I'm not on mute. I hope you.
We can hear you, Tracy.
Hi.
Tracy, I know that we've discussed the 1 meter advice earlier. Maybe we consider that, but also to the point it's going to make with Sylvia, sort of what you've been considering as you've started reopening. So maybe you could just give an overview of the type of business that you're working in, and then some of the activity you've been completing, and if you don't mind.
Yes, of course. So just to give a bit of a background to begin with, Park Dean Resorts, we own 67 holiday parks across the UK. So that's England, Scotland and Wales. And I joined the company on middle of February. So I did about 4 weeks before we went into lockdown. And in that period of time, I didn't really see very many parks, and lots of them weren't actually that far open at that point. So it has been a bit of a baptism of fire for me. So one thing the business is very good at doing is obviously opening and closing parks. So that's something that didn't phase the business, whereas lots of other businesses, you don't do that on a regular basis. However, we have never opened parks into what we would describe as peak before. So that will come with its challenges. So on Saturday, the 4th of July, we opened our parks up to our owners. So we saw lots of them return. And on Monday, we opened to our holiday makers. So we're only on day 2 of them being on park. And we are running at about 80% occupancy. So that's quite high. What we did do was our venues, so whether that be the restaurant or we have show bars, we have arcades, that all opened up on the Saturday. Obviously, the swimming pools didn't. So I guess when the guidance came out, it came out about 10 days before we were opening. And we did have to take a few sharp intakes of breath. There was some things in there that we weren't expecting, like no live entertainment. That really put us on the back foot. We also were expecting a reduction in the 2 meters, in the 2 meters social distance. What we hadn't envisaged was it to go with a set of other rules. We were expecting a straight sort of 2 meters to 1.5 or even 1 meter. We weren't expecting the mitigating factor bit. And the 2 meters to 1 meter plus, well, I'm sure many of you share, is the word plus was somewhat not heard eventually. People still talk 1 meter, don't they? So from a restaurant perspective, what that did was it started reigniting the debates around whether we should be wearing masks or visors in the restaurant. We'd prior to that taken a policy that we weren't going to have any masks or visors across the business. If people wished to wear them, we were going to call them enhanced workwear, and they had the option to do so. I think it was probably on the Thursday before the Saturday, as a business, we actually got to conclusion whereby what we have done is front of house for our seating. We have done 1 meter back to back on the seating or 1 meter side to side. However, where there are main walkways, i.e. where the serving team would need to walk, or this might be a main walkway through the restaurant to the toilet, something like that, that walkway is 2 meters. So that's the way in which we have approached it. The other things we've introduced are an app so that people can order at the table. just to try and reduce the amount of time between the server and the people at the table. If people don't wish to order or through using the app, they have to go up to the bar and open up a tab. And at that point, we only have one person from the party going up to open that order. I think the next bit, which has caused us, you know, a lot of debate, if you like, is everything around test and trace and how we record the details of the people. And one of the thoughts we had initially was we do hold records of, you know, who is the lead booker of the holiday makers coming to park, and obviously we have details of the owners of our park. So we thought, do you know what, if it happened, we could pass that information over. But we had a bit of a moment when we realized that by doing that, if you imagine some of our holiday parks are, you know, they're quite big. They could be a small village, or sorry, they could be a village or a small town. So consequently, we would be in effect passing over 50% of an electoral roll. That didn't feel quite right. So at the last hour on the Friday, we actually agreed the approach we were going to take, and it really is similar to if you were to go to a hotel and you were going down for breakfast and they've got a printout of the sheet with all the room numbers on and they highlight to say you're now eating breakfast. That's how we're doing it by the units of accommodation, and we're swapping those sheets regularly throughout the day, so we've got a bit of time stamping against it. I think for us, the wearing of PPE and masks was something that we wanted to avoid right from the beginning. And when we looked at the government guidance, it did sort of steer us in that direction. So that's something that we've been able to uphold all the way through. The other bit that we've had to do an awful lot of work around is obviously sanitising. I mean, you need volumes of sanitizer in this new world. I'm not saying that that we weren't using enough previously, but I think everybody appreciates the huge amount that we now need to use. So consequently, we've actually gone out and found a new supplier so that we can have endless supplies of sanitizer, because obviously the parks are very big and the ability for people probably to be having sort of a 5-gallon tank on their back going around spraying is hugely advantageous. And I suppose the only other another point would be around, we naturally have all of our parks Legionella disinfected when we go into reopening. So whilst we'd done it once for the season, we actually did it again. And I don't know if that's an area which other people have looked at, but it was an area that we were always very conscious of, with having so many sort of water tanks and shower heads across the parks. Is that helpful?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Tracy. No, it's very, very, very helpful. I can see we a moment on chat. No questions at the moment on chat, but if we do have any questions for Tracy, thank you. What I'd suggest is we try for Sylvia again. But thank you, Tracy. Yeah, very, very insightful. Sylvia, are you able to be heard?
I can't actually find Sylvia on the attendance list, Ian. So unless Sylvia is the one who's dialed in by phone, then she may be having trouble joining. So it might be best to
move on.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. You're doing a great job, Peter, by the way, because I'm a bit blind at the moment. I can't see a lot, so thank you.
It's a blind lead at the blind, Ian, believe me.
Well, I wasn't going to say anything. Maybe we could move to Will. So Will, from an NSF perspective, thank you for joining.
Thanks for inviting me.
Well, it's a similar sort of question, really. Sort of what from your, I guess, the businesses you work with, what are the types of areas that you've been advising or concerns that they're having from a hospitality sector around reopening, and just your insights?
So, so we've first of all, thanks for inviting me, and also out to Tracy. Me and the family are very much looking forward to our break in Cornwall at one of your sites in October. And I have to say, the park team business, we had a holiday booked over Easter that was postponed. And from a customer service perspective, it's just been absolutely amazing. They offered us a full full voucher with additional money on top to rebook. It was handled brilliantly, and I think the website's been really clear on all of the controls that are in place as well. So from a customer perspective, we feel very valued and very reassured. So there's some nice feedback to give at this time, I think. So from an NSF perspective, we've been trying to keep constant contact with our customers all the way through the pandemic to try and give them really a sort of a myth debunking service, and we've been running a client forum twice weekly, and we've now reduced that down to weekly. Now that businesses are back open again, and it's been really valuable bringing all the customers together to try and help solve issues collectively. It's been great for us to be able to help them as well in their journey to reopening too. And we had our last call on Tuesday, and we decided to focus the call around taking some feedback from people's experiences of reopening over the weekend. And really it was quite insightful. There were some definitely sort of 3 key points that I think I'll share on the forum today, which will give a bit of food for thought for people as we now enter the first, well, we're now a couple of days into the first full week of being able to trade with the anniversary on Saturday. So the bits of feedback that I'd like to share are, first of all, customers seem to have made up their own mind as to what things need to be in place in businesses. So because there's been obviously varying different approaches, but also a huge amount of media campaigns showing, well, when you go to the pub, this is what it looks like. When you go to a shop, this is what it looks like. And people have formed their own opinions as to what should be in place. And have missed the point that actually, as Tracy said, it's up to the individual business through an exercise of risk assessment to determine what controls are suitable and sufficient for controlling the virus. So some of the feedback that we've seen from our customers that has been shared is, why aren't your staff wearing visors? Why are your condiments served in bottles still and not single-use sachets? So they're not fully aware of that risk assessment process. So that's something to be really mindful of, is that expect to be in a position where you will need to not justify, but certainly explain why you've taken some of the decisions that you do, probably through your customer service team. So it's really important that if they've not already been brought into the journey as to why the business has made decisions that they've made in terms of how you're going to control the risk of COVID-19 in the business, that they're actually clued up as to the process that you've been through, how you came to those decisions. So if needed, they can give that advice to the customer and give them some reassurance that what you've done is the best thing that you could have done. Customers are incredibly nervous as well, and again, I think they need a lot more reassurance on site as to how they're being kept safe as well. Some of the feedback that we've seen over the weekend is that there's been a huge amount of expectation on people for the team members to be able to give them actively give them advice on what's how they're supposed to behave, how they're supposed to conduct themselves when they're on site. And a lot of the negative feedback has been across businesses that have just relied on using signage to inform customers of what they need to do. And a lot of the positive feedback has been where customers have been actually sort of verbally told, maybe that's at point of sale, maybe that there's a member of staff that's there to greet people at the door, But again, having that human contact to explain to them what the rules are on site has gone down well, and where it's been absent, it's created some challenge, I would say. And then the third thing is really a bit of a plea for me with my EHP hat on, is that I know how much time and money in some cases has been invested by businesses to get ready for a safe reopening, and all I say is that you need to start thinking about putting that same level of effort into making sure that you're ready for when things go wrong, because the last thing that you want to be is on the back foot of what to do if suddenly you have sites that are asked to go into a local lockdown. What happens when you have an employee that has been tested positive for COVID-19? Again, that will be in your standard operating procedures, your risk assessments somewhere. But have you actually tested it? Have you actually tested the business capability of being able to respond to those sorts of situations? And what's your strategy for that? So again, you know, the businesses that do that, and you know, from my commercial experience before that of working with NSF, the businesses that do those sorts of exercises are the ones that are going to prosper from a crisis. The ones that don't do that are going to be the ones that will forever be associated with a negative event and dealing with it badly. So so yeah, those are my top 3 insights from the weekend.
Thank you, Will. Thank you.
Ian, there's a question come in on chat that might be an ideal opportunity to draw Deb Smith in.
Yeah, this is from Andrew.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. We're thinking the same. Thank you, Peter. Yeah. So I was going to mention around that localized response and any view from Paul and Mike as what they're seeing with businesses preparing for that. But maybe we can go to that as some sort of panel questions afterwards. So to that point, let's segue into Deb, if you wouldn't mind, just from a sort of a hygiene perspective, I know you've sort of shared some guidance recently around reopening and food service. Do you mind sort of giving some of your thoughts? I know you've been a regular on some of these calls.
Might just be worth putting some context behind Paul's question regarding the post from Martin D'Agostino, because he's put a couple on recently. I think this one specifically is to do with airborne potential for SARS-CoV-2, which I know the WHO are looking at. So just to put a bit of context so that for Debs.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, I spotted Martin's post a couple of days ago. Firstly, congratulations to Pete for your promotion, shall we say, within SOFHT. So
Thank you. I'll try not to wreck it.
I'm sure you'll do a great job. Yes, and I think some of the comments that have already been made, particularly by Tracy, are where we were focusing some of our advice to the industry on reopening. As Tracy said, that they're very used to, as a business, closing and opening their facilities, but there are a lot of facilities that won't have that experience. And it was really to try and capture some of that information to give to them on how to think about the different types of cleaning they have to do before they reopen, and then once they have reopened. So fundamental to that is that if they're a food business, that they need to be cleaning for food safety. So a facility that's been shut down for a period of time may have had some challenges in terms of its hygiene, either from pests or maybe food residues that have been left within equipment or within the facility over that period of time. So something like a deep clean is probably a good place to start to remove the food safety risk, whether that be from allergens, microbes, or foreign bodies, including pests. We had a really good session on pests a few months ago now, gosh, it seems like a long time, where we had advice from the pest controllers about how you shut down the facility. even if you took really good precautions, I'm sure there will still be some pest activity over a period of shutdown. So that needs to be taken into consideration for food safety. And then once you've gone through that process and you've reopened, obviously there's the ongoing control for COVID control. So that being the cleaning of the frequently touched surfaces. And I'm obviously focusing on the cleaning and disinfection rather than the social distancing and the protective clothing. But within the guidance documents we've put together, there are some indications on where to focus that cleaning. The article that Andrew has flagged up on whole room disinfection, we've talked about whole room disinfection on and off throughout this whole process. The use of hydrogen peroxide, we know, is good as a surface disinfectant, and there have been studies to show that the whole room disinfection using hydrogen peroxide also works really well. So I can't see why this couldn't be an additional measure that some facilities could use to ensure the disinfection of a facility. But I would say that these techniques do only work on clean surfaces. So there needs to be the removal of biological fluids, of food materials, anything that can shield the virus particle or protect it from the disinfectant. So cleaning needs to be done before any form of disinfection, including the whole room disinfection techniques.
Thank you, Debs. Thank you. I'm glad you could answer that one.
Can I just pose a question to Debs there, Ian?
Sure, of course.
Just in terms of, I can see where Martin's articles or post has come from with the push in the last few days from a group of scientists looking at the aerial potential for SARS-CoV-2 rather than the droplets. So it'd be just interesting to see what the WHO comes out with, because they've maintained, if I understand it correctly, this is a respiratory droplet disease, but the pressure's there to look at it from an aerial droplet contamination point of view as well.
Yeah, absolutely. WHO have maintained throughout this whole few months that SARS-CoV-2 is a disease associated with the droplets from coughs and sneezes, and have very openly said it's not an airborne disease. So I think this new line of research will be very interesting to look at.
Hello, it's Paul here. I absolutely agree. It is fascinating because it was on one of these panels right at the start of lockdown where someone asked a question about COVID being quite susceptible to workers in the meat industry, which led me to do a little bit of research. And I found some research from China which indicated that ventilation may well be an issue in the spread of COVID. And it strikes me that some of the outbreaks that we've had at meat plants and food processing plants probably concern large cutting rooms or food production rooms that are refrigerated, where the temperature is controlled. So therefore, there's an awful lot of air movement. So I think there probably is some credible evidence behind the suggestion that the virus could be airborne, or there could be situations such as refrigeration or ventilation where air movement is made fairly rapid, where the virus does become airborne and is much more contagious in that way.
There was a very interesting article in the Journal of the Physics of Fluids, which is a fascinating read in itself, that talked about droplet survival, and it's on different surfaces in terms of temperature and relative humidity. But I think, Paul, also those reports had to temper in as well the fact that many of these workers may be travelling to work together, maybe in shared accommodation, and also maybe huddled together in the bad weather under smoking shelters.
Yes, yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So I think every question we get about this blooming virus seems to raise a whole load of new ones.
I think there's still a lot that's unknown, and we're learning every day. So watch this space.
To the point around staff accommodation, one of the things that we did as a business was actually we do provide an element of staff accommodation, and we actually did delve into what the sharing of that accommodation looks like. And could we reduce the element of sharing, you know, whether it was shared bathroom, shared kitchen, etc. And then actually looked at who was sharing with who. Not that I'm playing matron or something like that, please don't have that impression of me. But also is if there was an aspect of isolation, needing self-isolation, is what risk did that present to that park? So for example, if we had a house where all the chefs were living together, consequently we could end up in a position of not being able to open the kitchen. So we did actually have to do quite a bit of work around that.
Ian, I've noticed that Sylvia has been able to connect, so she's you may want to draw Sylvia in. I'm not sure if you picked that up.
No, I can't see. So thank you very much, Peter. So firstly, thank you, Tracy, for that last comment, and then if we could move over to Sylvia. Hello, Sylvia. Can you hear and can you be heard? Hello, Sylvia. No, can we not?
So if Sylvia can hear us, she is still on mute.
No, I don't think we can. We unmute Sylvia remotely.
Rachel may be able to. Have you seen, Ian, the question from David?
Yeah, well, I was going to move. Well, there were two areas I was going to ask, more around the localized lockdown and then discussion around complacency. Which so maybe we could just start the question on localized lockdown. So to the points we had around sort of how do businesses start to prepare, as Will has said, for a localized lockdown, and Paul or Mike, from your perspective, are those the types of questions being asked of businesses, of that level of preparation? Are you able to give any?
Yes, I think. Yeah, I think one or two businesses are concerned that if they take down names and addresses of their customers, and one of the customers turns out to have COVID-19, that means that they may have to close down again, and that leads us to be a bit nervous that they're actually going to take those details from the customers in the first place. So we've had to try and reassure them that would be unlikely. But what I can see from the premises that have closed just recently, I'm assuming that the business operators took it upon themselves to close voluntarily, because I don't think Public Health England or the Environmental Health Departments were involved in those closures. What we're telling businesses is that if it proves that a customer has tested positive for COVID-19, you would need to actually provide us with that information and provide Public Health England with that information. But it's unlikely that you would be asked to close. It may well be that your staff might be asked to go for a test to see whether they're positive. But because the person that had the COVID has been in and essentially vacated the premises, probably what would happen is that you'd be asked to do a bit of a deep clean before reopening again. But the worrying thing from our perspective is that guidance we've been issued is virtually not nil. We've not been told what to happen, what we need to do in the event of a local lockdown. We have no idea. We've tried to speak with some of our colleagues, environmental health colleagues in other parts of the countries where there have been local lockdowns, and they're telling us that they environmental health are not getting involved. So there's still a lot of uncertainty around the track and trace system. So for us to be able to give businesses advice on that, it makes it very difficult.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you. Any other comments from anybody in that area before we move on?
We did have yes, Ian. We did have some clients on the forum call we held yesterday, raising concern that actually it was transparent within the media reports that came out around those 3 pubs that have voluntarily closed due to potential COVID cases being in those businesses over the weekend, that they had actually taken action themselves to try and contact the customers that they'd taken the information from. And for me, that is surely the job of the local environmental, well, the local health protection teams to do, not the businesses themselves. I can completely understand from a business point of view that you would want to let your customers know. It would be seen as being something that was perhaps right to do, but I'd be interested to take Paul and Michael's view on that, because I can't see any need for businesses to do that, and I actually think that it in itself could makes a bad situation even worse.
Absolutely. Well, I agree. It's not the job of the business to do that, and I can't see what the benefit was, to be honest with you. Not unless there was some information there that could be passed on to Public Health England later in the, later on. But the one thing that did sort of concern me a little bit was that one of the pubs had reported that a lot of the telephone numbers they'd been given were not available. So they'd clearly been given false information, which to me goes back to this whole thing that we spoke about at the future about the public having to take some responsibility and having to comply with the guidance themselves.
Unfortunately, I totally agree with the comment so far, and it's a big shout and maybe total madness to have the expectation that businesses are responsible for contacting or tracing potential COVID carriers, etc., because they've been to their premises. But unfortunately, the COVID regulations, etc., still sit alongside the regulations that we've always worked with, and that is the principle of a duty of care. POSH, the control of substance hazardous to health, etc. If the risk or hazard was slightly different, and you had that information, the duty of care would so much prominently still sit with you. But COVID is slightly different than that, in the sense that that would not be such a reasonable expectation. But principally, you are the principal duty of care holder, and you should be, and if you've got that information, you should be contacting them and making them aware. But I understand the impracticalities of that, and unfortunately, it's an area as well that even the local authorities don't have deliberate guidance on. But I just know through looking at COSH and risk assessment and health and safety work act, etc., that responsibility unfortunately still does lean to you slightly.
I would also ask another question to Michael and Paul, so thanks for your feedback on that one. One of the things that we're seeing from businesses that have continued to trade throughout the pandemic, so those takeaway operators, etc., coffee shops, and indeed some businesses that have been able to pivot and move to a takeaway delivery model, is that what we advised them at the top end of the pandemic would happen, has happened, insofar as they've thrown all of their efforts into making sure that their COVID controls are followed, that actually we have seen no improvement, or maybe even a slight decline in some of their standards of compliance for food safety, fire safety, health and safety, etc. All of the other risks that they should be managing well in their business. And you know, we think that there are two likely contributing factors towards that. Well, actually three, to be fair. The first one is bringing teams back in very quickly, with the businesses pivoting to reopen after a short period of closure. So they've not had enough time to acclimatise properly or re-engage with some of the fundamental procedures that they need to be following, as well as new ones which are trained back in. The second one is that some of the teams are notably having a labour saving in there, insofar as they're doing a reduced level of business, and therefore some of the basics aren't being covered. And then the third one is that in some cases, controls that they've introduced into the premises have been to the detriment of being able to do some of the more routine things that they should be doing. So I don't know, maybe they've added some additional barrier protection in, or you know, introduced gloves into their kitchens, where beforehand they would have relied on hand washing because they felt it was the right thing to do to try and combat the virus, you know, stop the spread of the virus. And now have created food safety issues or health and safety issues as a result. Do you think that as you revisit businesses after Super Saturday, that there will be more focus to look at those wider risks and make sure that they're not being forgotten from an enforcement perspective?
Yes, I think you're right. I think when businesses have concentrated so much on the guidance and what they should be doing for COVID-19, they have taken their eye off the ball. We have seen some evidence of that, where they've taken their eye off the ball on other things, like, you know, like some food safety principles, some controls, some health and safety issues. And by introducing control measures for COVID, they've inadvertently introduced more hazards that they're probably not aware of. If I give you an example that Mike and I discussed on Friday, we went to a pub that had an upstairs seating area, and what we were speaking to the business operator, and he was talking about putting hand sanitizers stations at the top and the bottom of the stairs. And it suddenly occurred to me that if someone you know, covered their hand in a gel, hand sanitizer gel, tripped on the stairs and went to grab hold of the banister to try and stop themselves from falling, would that hand sanitizer make their hands slippy? Would they actually be able to grip the banister? And, you know, would it actually introduce that additional hazard? So, you know, it is things like that are becoming apparent as we move on. And you're absolutely right. You know, a lot of businesses have taken their eye off the ball.
But I think it's important to remember that when it comes to local authority and enforcement, etc., our yardstick is always something has to be significant, and it's whatever is reasonable and certainly practicable. But the fact, you know, people are aware that there's going to be added risk or risk ignored, but it will be just a case of managing it as we go along. I mean, the increase in hand washing and gel will trigger dermatitis where previously it wasn't present, or people who weren't having their hands wet so often now are, and they'll be getting skin conditions and requiring more moisturization of their hands or whatever. So there are going to be knock-on effects and differences, and especially with, you know, some of the changes physically we've made to our premises. with regard to maybe ventilation, the walkways, the one-way systems we're setting up. But I don't think anyone has anything to be overly concerned about. The fact that they're aware of it, and once they're aware of it, the expectation is they should be doing everything they can that's reasonably expected of them. Shouldn't cause that, should mean they shouldn't have any unnecessary concern.
Yeah, I think our concern at NSF and what we're advising our clients back on is that you need to adjust your controls proportionate to the immediate risk.
Yeah.
If you don't need to put physical barriers up in your kitchen, perspex shields and whatever, because you've got other mitigating controls in place, well, there's a more immediate risk of fire in the kitchen. There's a more immediate risk of burns, etc., where you need to get to help or a place of safety fairly quickly. So, are barriers really appropriate for those types of environments where there might be more flexible controls that actually help you tolerate more immediate risks to more tolerable levels?
The only thing I'd say and add to that is formally any approach to that should reflect a hierarchy of control measures, and something that we often forget in our industries is we over rely on personal protective equipment.
I couldn't agree with you more.
And in the hierarchy of control measures, personal protective equipment is actually last and not first, as many people think. Elimination is primarily the first one, and it sort of works it, etc. So it's important that you have the appropriate control measure, but quite often the one that first jumps out at you, the one that is sometimes seen as an industry standard or nationally being used, like masks, etc., isn't the correct one to use. There are better options, and as well with all PPE, they in turn have their knock-on effect, and if the danger they present creates a more significant risk, then you shouldn't be wearing it. An example that we had ourselves with our own decision-making process is having disposable aprons, because technically we go through so many, but then it occurred to us that it would only take coming in contact with a hot surface that they would then present an unnecessary risk. So things like that do have to be considered.
We've got a few minutes left, so just want. I know, Debs, you did raise your hand. Not sure if it's still raised.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Ian, just to say that we've seen a similar pattern within food manufacturing. So we've actually had quite a lot of reports of food safety controls being, I wouldn't say forgotten, but maybe not given as much focus as the cleaning for COVID, mainly because the food safety auditors haven't been able to go into the sites and keep an eye on everything. I do think that's a very short-term thing. I think as soon as the auditing starts again, the food safety standards will come back into line. But just to say that we've seen them very similar within food manufacturing, as you guys have obviously seen in hospitality. So, yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Debs. I just wonder whether we can get Sylvia on. I can see a few communications around unmuting. Let's give it a last go. We've only got a few minutes left. No. Sylvia, we'd love to invite you onto a future panel. As I know we talked yesterday, and you had some very good areas to go through, or maybe we can share something on the SOFHT website. If not, so maybe we can say that afterwards. We've got a few minutes left. Maybe we could just finish on the last one around complacency. Tracy, maybe from yourself to David's point around complacency in the workplace and ensuring that whatever controls were put in place continue to be focused on. Have you got any thoughts around how you'll continue to keep some of these practices live and keep the awareness up?
Yes, I mean, it's an area that we've given a lot of thought to, insofar as we've ran a very big campaign called Welcome Home. And this is to welcome our teams back, to give them buzz and motivation, and also around the COVID controls. So on the back of that, what we've got is a lot of our senior team going out on park, visiting park, discussing COVID controls with them, experiencing everything. And then we have through Workplace, which is a Facebook feed, if you like. There's lots of posts and pictures, etc., showing COVID being done the right way. We have had to put quite a bit of guidance out around that, because people are quite used to sort of, celebrating with their arms around each other and hugging, and all of those we've had to take down. So we're just trying to continuously enforce it in that way. One of the things that we haven't done is, whilst we do have an audit system in place, whether it be from a strict safety compliance perspective or from a financial perspective, we haven't actually put standards into that to audit against. Although whenever anybody is out on park, we've given a few sort of top tips around it, so that we can keep that messaging alive. We're very conscious, though, that it's a very agile process, and for what we put in at the weekend, we do believe that it might need to change in the next few weeks as we see how our customers and guests react to it.
Thank you, Tracy. I'm mindful we've got a few minutes. Peter, I'm going to hand to you. Debs, I see your hand's popped up a few times. Maybe if you've got a comment, and then pass back to Peter.
No, sorry, Ian, it's just me.
No, it's okay. Good. Well, we've got through it today. There's a few technological challenges, but there you go. That's the way of the world at the moment, I think. Peter, to you, finish, I guess, at the top of the hour, so hand it back to you.
Thank you. I mean, the thing is, Ian, we can only go up from here. which is reassuring. So no, I just wanted to thank you, Ian, for sharing that so well, and thank you all to all the panelists for their views and for the discussion. It's been very good. And finally, just thank you to everybody that's attended. I'm sure that we'll be continuing with these. In fact, I know we're going to be continuing with these. And as the science continues to develop around this virus, and as we get more and more experience for managing it and controlling it and living with it, then I'm sure that we'll continue to run these soft focus live events. So hopefully you've all found it of benefit today. Thank you again to all the panelists, and thank you again to all the attendees. And normally you say at the end of this thing, safe journey home, but safe journey to the kitchen for a cup of coffee.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Okay. Bye, everybody.
Cheers. Bye bye.